Late into the night, when most of the hospital had fallen into silence, the corridors of the pediatric wing at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis hummed with the low breath of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of monitors. The antiseptic scent that clung to the air mingled with a faint whisper of lavender soap, creating an atmosphere both sterile and strangely comforting. On nights like this, only the bravest souls or the most determined janitors roam the hallways. Camila Rivera, scrub top pulled tight around her slender frame, moved slowly, her mop gliding almost reverently over the polished linoleum. Her dark hair was tucked into a cap, but a few strands had escaped to frame a face lined with quiet resilience. At 26, she had already learned that life could shatter in an instant, yet somehow leave you standing in its aftermath. She pressed on, pausing briefly outside room 217, intent on finishing her sweep without interruption. Inside that room, 7-year-old Noah Bennett lay rigid beneath crisp white sheets, the low, rhythmic beeping of his four-pump marking the passing seconds like a metronome. The night before his bone marrow transplant, he was far from asleep. Instead, he stared at the pale green walls, as though they held the answer to a riddle he could not yet understand. His small hands clutched the blanket, knuckles whitening with each breath that came too fast and too shallow. "What if I go to sleep and I don't wake up?" he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of his own fear. In the hush of the room, the words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and fragile as glass. Camila froze, her mop handle slipping from her grasp. She had heard that voice before, that same tremor of terror only hers had belonged to a little boy named Matteo. He was her son, born with a laugh like sunshine and a smile he could never take off. 3 years ago, she had watched that smile fade forever on the very bed across from where Noah lay now. A tragic accident, a split-second impact, and the vibrant life of her child had slipped away. She swallowed, eyes stinging, and made herself step forward. The mop abandoned at the door, she extended a tentative hand and pushed gently on the frame until the door cracked open. Noah looked up, surprise flickering across his tear-streaked face. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly, voice as gentle as a lullaby. He shook his head and the sheet rustled as he sat up, eyes wide with raw fear. I'm scared," he admitted. She nodded, moving closer until she could kneel beside the bed without looming over him. Then, as if drawn by a force stronger than grief, she reached into the deep pocket of her scrub top and withdrew a small wooden toy car. The chipped red paint had faded to a muted rose and the initials MR were carved carefully into its underside. "I had a little boy about your age," she began, voice quivering just enough to betray her own sorrow. "His name was Matteo. When he was frightened, I'd give him this car. He said it made him feel brave, like he could drive away his fear." Noah's eyes widened and he let the car slip into his hands. He turned it over, watching how the wheels still rolled despite their stubborn stiffness. "Did it help?" he whispered. "Sometimes," she confessed, smiling through the pain. "And maybe it can help you tonight." He lay back against the pillow, clutching the car to his chest. Camila watched as his breathing slowed, the tightness around his heart softening just enough for sleep to find him. When she was certain he had drifted into slumber, she rose quietly, tucked the covers around him, then slipped out into the hallway. She expected nothing, a glance of acknowledgement at best. Yet, as she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with a tall figure in a crisp white lab coat. Dr. Julian Bennett's expression was unreadable, eyes shadowed by fatigue and something else, wonder. He said nothing, simply regarded her with the intensity of a man who had just witnessed a miracle. Then, wordlessly, he turned and walked away. The next morning arrived in a flurry of beeping alarms, hurrying nurses, and whispered prayers. Noah's surgery stretched from dawn until the afternoon sun cast long, golden shafts through the windows. Hours later, as the pediatric wing exhaled a collective sigh of relief, Camila found herself lingering near the nurse's station, heart pounding with anticipation she barely understood. A few minutes later, she saw him, small, pale, but smiling. "Miss Camila," he chirped, voice stronger than the night before. She approached, breath catching in her throat. "You made it through?" she whispered, kneeling beside his wheelchair. He nodded, eyes bright. Thank you. In that moment, a bridge formed between them, built with something stronger than grief or fear: hope. Over the following days, Camila became a familiar presence in Noah's life. On her breaks, she slipped him cookies she'd bought with coins she pinched from her own meager wages. She told him stories of her childhood in a small town on the Gulf Coast, of summer nights spent chasing fireflies and the taste of fresh watermelon. Sometimes she even sang to him softly when his pain grew too sharp, the lullaby a melody she had once sung to Matteo. Dr. Bennett noticed. He began to linger just outside the door, catching bits of her tales, observing how Noah's laughter returned in cautious bursts. One evening he stepped inside. "Tell me about our brave racer," he said, voice low. Camila met his gaze, surprised by its warmth. She told him of Matteo's love for speed, of how he used to race the toy car down long hallways in their home, giggling as he imagined victory. Julian listened, silent, then nodded as though a puzzle had clicked into place. By the time Noah was ready to go home, the unspoken bond between doctor and janitor had become something neither could ignore. On Noah's last morning, Camila entered room 217 with a small bundle of stuffed animals she had gathered from colleagues up and down the hall. Noah's eyes lit up, but then he held up the wooden car. "I think he wants to go back to you," Noah said softly, handing it to her. Her breath caught. The car, now worn smooth by his grip, seemed to pulse with the memories of two children whose lives it had touched. Camila pressed it to her heart, tears shining in her eyes. He leaned forward and added, "He helped me be brave. Maybe he can help you too?" She knelt beside him, voice trembling as she replied, "He already has." After she left the hospital that day, Camila returned to her routine, sweeping floors, emptying bins, cleaning spills, but nothing felt quite the same. On her first break, she checked her phone and found an email from an unfamiliar private foundation. The subject line read, "A gift of hope." With trembling fingers, she opened the message. It offered her a full scholarship to pursue pediatric nursing. Tuition, books, and a living stipend provided in her name. There was no signature, only a note at the end. "You gave hope when it was needed most. Allow us to give some back." Her knees buckled as she sank onto the breakroom chair, tears spilling freely. It was Julian's doing. She realized his quiet gratitude woven into the generosity of people whose names she might never know. A few days later, she stood on the porch of a modest house, floral pots lining the railing. She smoothed her dress, heart fluttering in her chest as she raised her hand to knock. The door swung open, and Noah flung his arms around her before she could speak. "Miss Camila, you came," he exclaimed, voice bright. Inside, the table was set for 3 candles flickering, plates piled with pasta and garlic bread, a vase of fresh daisies at its center. On the shelf, gleaming under a lamplight, lay the restored wooden car, its red paint shining and the initials "Mish" etched in silver. Next to it, a small drawing from Noah showed 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun, labeled "Me, Miss Camila," and Matteo, with little wings drawn above Matteo's head. Julian stood at her side, tying an apron around his waist. His smile was warm and real, eyes reflecting a gratitude deeper than words. "You helped me remember what hope looks like," he said softly. She blinked back tears, unable to speak. Instead, she found Noah's hand and squeezed it. In that simple gesture, she felt the truth of their journey, that sometimes healing arrived on silent feet, carried by a stranger who dared to listen. They sat down to dinner, and laughter filled the room, rich, unguarded laughter that scattered the shadows of the past. Afterward, they settled on the couch with bowls of ice cream, and Noah snuggled against her side. "I think Matteo would like us," he whispered, eyes heavy with sleep. Camila wrapped her arm around him, resting her cheek on his hair. "I think he already does," she replied, voice thick with love. Outside, a summer breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the promise of new beginnings. Inside, 3 souls bound by loss, fear, and the courage to stay found in each other, a family born not of blood, but of shared grace. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from those who have the least to give, And sometimes, the simplest act of kindness, like a worn wooden car passed in the quiet of a hospital room, and spark a chain of miracles. In the gentle glow of lamplight, with the soft hum of cicadas in the distance, hope was no longer a whisper, but a song they sang together. Each note threaded with the memory of a child named Matteo, a boy named Noah, and a woman named Camila, whose love had the power to heal even the deepest wounds.